Hello and welcome to Rose Red Homestead, where we really focus on self-reliance, food security, and emergency preparedness. Today's topic is pretty serious, and it's mostly going to be just a talk. And I wish that we could all be in the same room so that we could see each other's facial expressions. And I hope that you know that Jim and I are not doom and gloomers. We're really not. But the title of today's video is The Coming Food Catastrophe. And actually, those are not my words. I want to start off with reading you some quotes that have just been in the news very recently. From the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, this year's food access issues could become next year's global food shortage, he said. No country will be immune to the social and economic repercussions of such a catastrophe. And so the UN is looking at next year being a catastrophe in terms of the availability of food, and no country will be exempt. And this from the Food and Agricultural Organization within the United Nations. They identify three things as the reason behind why we are facing the food shortages and the coming catastrophe. Conflict is the main driver. Conflict all over the world, not just the war between Russia and the Ukraine. Weather extremes have destroyed crops all over the globe. And I don't care what the cause is. We're not going to debate that. The fact of the matter is weather extremes have greatly impacted our food supply. And then last of all is the economic shock. We are in well, they're not quite calling it a recession yet, but it feels like it, with prices being more expensive than they have been in about the last 40 years. It was one source that I read. And they are attributing it mostly due to the fallout from the COVID pandemic, with supply lines and availability of things that before COVID, we could walk into a store, supply lines were not an issue, and pretty much buy anything we wanted. And then from the McKinsey podcast, this is what they say. The causes are the pandemic, supply chain strains, climatic events. Converging disruptions have sent food prices soaring, and Russia's invasion of the Ukraine, one of the world's 6 breadbasket regions, risks tilting the food system into a global crisis. Now, if Jim and I are not doom and gloomers, and I just read all of this stuff to you, what does that mean that we are? Well, we don't go around with a sad sack attitude, worry, 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 worry. What we like to do is think that, yes, we are realists. We believe this information because we already are seeing signs of it, and all of us have seen those signs coming for the last months. We know that food has been more and more difficult to find and that food prices are soaring. So how do we handle it without sinking into a depression ourselves? Well, let's be realists about it. We know that this is coming. All indications are that it can be very severe and that no country on earth is going to escape. And so what we need to do is do the best thing that we can to prepare right now. So one of the things that I like to think about in situations like this is that, yes, this is a downward spiral in terms of the availability of food. But think about walking down a hill while doing a yo-yo. The head of that yo-yo goes up and down, even though the trajectory is downward. There are going to be good spots and bad spots and good spots and bad spots through the next months as we go forward. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. We need to be opportunists and take advantage of the things that are in front of us, and we need to look for things that provide opportunities for us to be more prepared. For instance, one of our viewers just reported that she found pork shoulder in her local store for 99 cents a pound. What? That is fantastic. We just recently did a video where I mentioned that we had gotten a fabulous buy on pork shoulder for doing some carnitas, and that was like 2 something a pound, and I was thrilled at that price. So there are opportunities all around us that we can take advantage of. And so having an attitude of getting things done and that we will be conquering this is what is going to carry us through what may be some very difficult times. So, how do we store food for the future? Some of us have already started. Some of us have been doing it for a really long time. Now, when I say food storage, what's the first thing that pops into your mind? And I can pretty much tell you what generation you're from. If it is wheat, beans, rice, corn, powdered milk, that means you're from my generation, because that's what we were taught to store. And I remember the days when we would look at a little list and it would say 300 pounds of wheat per person per year. Well, when my first husband and I were raising our 6 children, that would have been over a ton of wheat that we were going to have to store if we followed that list. What are we going to do with a ton of wheat? Well, the idea was wheat was needed for bread. It's very nutritious, and it is. That hasn't changed. And wheat is needed for bread, and bread is a very basic staple. So we want to be able to figure out how to do bread. But let me ask you something. Are you going to run out and buy wheat if you don't have the proper equipment to deal with it? Wheat is a very hard grain, and whatever we store, we need to have the capability of being able to deal with it when the time comes for us to eat it. And hopefully, we're going to be rotating through it, so we're eating it right now. Now for us, those 4 things are very much in our food storage, but we do not have a ton of wheat. We don't need a ton of wheat because we can now store flour, and flour will last us for a year. We can store flour for a year easily. So if you, instead of those 4 grains and legumes, and we want to be sure that we have complete proteins stored, my children's generation are probably thinking more like Fruit Loops and mac and cheese. Well, for heaven's sake, if that's what you eat, then go get it on your shelf and store it. And so we need to store what we're going to eat, and I've said that over and over again, and I can't emphasize that enough. We do not want to be stuck with a whole food storage area full of foods that we can't possibly eat because we hate them or because we don't have the equipment to work with them. So Jim and I have thought a lot about what can we do? What can we do to help? Now, my sister Cindy and I have written that book that's still at the editors. It is a book on food storage. And many of you are thinking that that book is just going to be the answer to your problems. Well, I don't want you to get up false hopes. That book is not a recipe book, and I'm afraid many people think it is. So while that book does have recipes in it, those recipes only apply to the meal plans that we are presenting for you. Well, what if you don't like the meals that we have planned? The whole idea in that book is we give you a model and we populate that model with meals that our families use. But the idea is for you to see that model and then plug in replacements for the meals that are there that you don't like. And then it's meal planning, and then it's doing the math. And then we have tables of how much you need to buy for each meal for a given period of time. If you want to store, if you want to be prepared for 3 months' time or 6 months' time or a whole year worth of time. That's what that book is. And it will be helpful, but it's probably going to feel pretty daunting when you start looking at those tables. And I'm actually going to publish a preview of some of those tables so that you can see what we mean. The other thing is that Jim and I have put out about 350 videos. It just blew us away the other day when we looked to see how many we have done. And they're all on self-reliance, food security, and emergency preparedness. And we get asked all the time, Pam, you said this in one of those videos. Which video was that? I don't know. I've done so many videos. I don't have them cataloged in my mind by everything I said in each of those videos. And so it's hard even for me to go back and think, oh my gosh, which video did I say that in? And sometimes I'll do a search. That takes my time to answer one question. So we were trying to think of a way of how we could answer questions and have it broadly applicable instead of just for one person who has one question. And so yesterday, Cindy, my sister, and I released a book on protein bowls. And I have spent a large part of today putting in a link to the Rose Red Homestead bookstore. There's a link right there which you can click on, and it will take you to where we are selling those books. Right now, there are 2 versions. I uploaded a PDF version today of that book because after some comments, and about 3 people have had difficulties in getting that book to open, I've realized, okay, we need not only an EPUB version for those of you who really like e-readers, but we also need a PDF version that you can download and that you can print pieces of it if you want. And we're granting 1 license for printing 1 copy of any one of our books because we want the information to be widely available. We're going to keep costs down as much as possible. The cost for Cindy's and my food storage book has escalated astronomically to the point we no longer believe it is efficient for us to do print versions. People can't afford that. We want to have our things available for most people to be able to do. And so that book is most likely going to come out in PDF so that you can be selective and download, print the pages that you want of the book, the whole thing if you want, and that would even be cheaper than it would be for you to buy a hardbound copy of it because it's going to be way high if we have it printed. We have the document that we can have it printed in the future if we want to, but first we're going to just probably release it as a PDF. But what if Jim and I did a series of books on topics related to self-reliance, food security, and emergency preparedness? These little booklets of about 50 pages, like the Protein Bowls book. These would be small books, they would be low cost, and both in EPUB and PDF format. So a couple of months ago, I believe that it was in a micro moment, I announced that I was backing away from answering your comments and that Jim was taking over answering comments because I was working on some really special projects. Well, we have announced 2 of those special projects. One, of course, is our new channel. The link is now on our homepage and it's below every single one of our videos, as is the link to our bookstore. I'm going back to all of our old videos and putting those links in. That's going to take a while, so I'm starting with our most popular videos first and then going on down the list. The other announcement was, of course, the book that Cindy and I announced yesterday that is already on the market. And thank you so much for those of you that have purchased that book. It is just so fun to see that people are actually buying that book. I'm well published in my field. I have a lot of articles in scientific journals. This is my first foray into general audience things, and I can't believe how tickled I am. It is just the funnest thing. And so I want to announce a couple of other projects that we are working on. In about a week or 10 days, I will be putting forth a book on how to freeze dry food at home. That one is, I'm sole author on that one, and it's almost ready. I've decided today, after talking to Jim, I'm going to put additional recipes in that book, and so I'm going to add a few more days while I get together some of our recipes that we use for freeze drying complete meals. And then the other project is that I'm working with my daughter Cindy, and we are doing a book on corn, how to nixtamalize it, how to work with it in your food storage to get all of that nutrition out of it. So I have ideas for other small books. I want to do one on dehydrating. And what we would like to ask is, help us come up with what it is that you need from us that will be easy for you to understand. We know that the internet may not always be with us. And so we want to get information out to you apart from the videos that you might be able to have in hard copy to help with whatever it is that you need. And so please let us know. It takes me about, if I were retired, I keep saying that, if I were retired, it would take me about a month to do a book. I can do a good solid book in about a month. But because I have to work on it in my off times, it will probably take about 2 months per book. But send us your ideas of what you would like for us that we can help you with. I was thinking of a book on soups in jars also, to where you don't have to go look at 8 different recipes, but rather you have all 8 recipes plus some others in a book that you could print off and have. So give us your ideas. Help us to help our whole community so that we can be very well prepared for this coming food. I'm not going to call it a catastrophe because I hate words like that. They're so loaded. So instead I'll say for our coming food situation, for the uncertain times that we live in. But this is pretty serious stuff, and we believe that it is coming, and we want to be prepared for it. So let's work together and help each other, and let us know how we can best help you. So thanks for listening to my little talk today. I'm going to go back into my computer now and work on the freeze drying book so I can get it out to you for next week. So thanks for being here. We appreciate you so much, and we will see you at our next video.